Okay, let's dive in. Imagine this. You're right there at the heart of this super exciting, fast-growing tech startup. You put everything into it, your ideas, your energy, basically your whole being, into building this app that's changing how millions of people connect. Then, boom, you're just 24, and you get kicked out. Not just kicked out, but humiliated, dragged into this really public lawsuit over sexual harassment. You walk away from the company, sure, but also from your reputation, from this whole vision you helped create. I mean, that's a crushing blow for anyone, right? Especially for a young woman trying to make it in Silicon Valley, which, let's be honest, is notoriously tough. But here's where the story gets really, really interesting. Instead of just vanishing, which a lot of people might have done, she does something incredibly bold. Just 14 months later, she launches a new app. And it's not just another dating app clone. No, this one is designed from the ground up to flip the power dynamic, to put women in charge. Fast forward a bit, by the time she's 31, she takes that idea public. We're talking a staggering $13 billion valuation.
Overnight, she becomes the youngest self-made female billionaire in history. So this isn't just a business success story. It's the deeper story of Whitney Wolfe Herd, how she managed to turn that betrayal into, well, a revolution. So our mission with this deep dive today is to really unpack that incredible journey. We want to understand how this woman, facing just immense odds, didn't just survive Silicon Valley, she actually rewrote its rules. We've dug deep into the sources you've given us, pulled out the key insights, the crucial moments, to understand not just what happened, but why her story matters so much, why it resonates today.
Yeah, it's fascinating because Whitney's path just completely breaks the mold of the typical Silicon Valley narrative, doesn't it? For so long, that world has been overwhelmingly male. The story is usually, the guy coding in a garage, maybe dropping out of Stanford to pitch VCs. Whitney wasn't that. She didn't fit the profile. She wasn't the coder. She was the marketing genius, the community builder. And maybe that different background is exactly why she could look at online dating and see something totally different. She wasn't just trying to make a slightly better version of what existed. She fundamentally challenged the core assumptions, especially around gender dynamics. She literally flipped it. And amazingly, built this billion-dollar company directly from the fallout of a huge, very public, very personal scandal. And, when we connect this to her past, we have to remember she wasn't new to this game. She was a co-founder at Tinder.
Right, the marketing brain behind Tinder.
Exactly. The app that, love it or hate it, completely changed modern dating. That swipe mechanic became ubiquitous. But that raises the big question, right? How did that dream job, that groundbreaking role, turn so toxic? What really happened there? What led to that incredibly public lawsuit, the media frenzy, back in 2014? Because honestly, most people, after something like that, they'd retreat. They'd want anonymity, maybe leave tech altogether.
Yeah, you'd think so.
But Whitney Wolfe Herd, she chose a completely different path. A much harder, but ultimately much more powerful one.
Okay, let's really try to understand that emotional state Whitney Wolfe Herd was in right after leaving Tinder. The sources call it an emotional vacuum, which sounds intense, like this powerful mix of grief for what she'd lost, this raw anger at the injustice she felt, and also this burning need to prove something, not just to the world or her old colleagues, but maybe mostly to herself.
Absolutely. It wasn't just leaving a job or a brand. It felt like leaving a culture, a system that, from her perspective, had pushed her out, devalued her work, and ultimately betrayed her trust.
It sounds incredibly personal.
Deeply personal. A wound that left her, understandably, completely reeling.
And the sources say, for weeks after the scandal broke, the weight of it all, the public judgment, the personal cost was so heavy that she actually considered leaving tech for good. Can you imagine? She clearly had this talent, this knack for seeing what people wanted, for building communities online. But the toll was that immense.
Yeah, reports mention her basically going into hiding for weeks, avoiding media, dealing with feelings of, shame, anger, confusion. She deleted her social media, apparently spent time hiking, reconnecting with just a very small circle of trusted friends, really questioning everything, her career, her identity.
Just trying to process it all.
Exactly. But it was in that quiet space, away from all the noise, that something started to shift. Despite the hurt, she still believed in technology's power to connect people positively. And maybe surprisingly, she still saw potential in dating apps.
But knew they had to be different.
Fundamentally different, built on completely new rules. And this is really where the core vision for Bumble started to take shape. She wasn't thinking about just making a small improvement or a Tinder, but slightly nicer. No. She started sketching out something much bigger. More than just an app. It was conceived as, maybe a counterculture. A direct response to the dating norms that she felt were broken.
A counterculture, I like that.
Yeah. The central question she kept asking was simple but powerful. What if women were actually in control from the very first interaction? What if dating could be designed to feel safer, more intentional, genuinely equal?
So not just replicating Tinder's model.
Not at all. Rebuilding the whole logic. Putting female agency, respect, empowerment right at the absolute center, designing a space where women set the terms. Which brings us to a really critical point. Okay, you have this vision, but you've just been through this massive public scandal. How on earth do you get funding? How do you get support?
Yeah, who would back someone seen as maybe a PR risk?
The answer came from a pretty unexpected place. A call from Andrey Andreev.
The Russian billionaire, founder of Badoo.
The very same. Badoo was already huge, one of the biggest dating platforms globally, massive international presence. And Andreev had been watching the Tinder saga unfold. But crucially, he didn't see Whitney as a risk.
Interesting. What did he see?
He saw someone underestimated, someone with a clear vision and, importantly, a deep understanding of the American market. Something Badoo, despite its size, didn't really have a strong brand foothold in. Badoo had the tech, the engineers, the global infrastructure. They just needed that disruptive, culturally relevant brand for the U.S.
And Whitney could provide that.
Perfectly positioned. Her recent experiences gave her this unique insight into what needed to change. So they meet in mid-2014, and the sources describe this instant connection. Not romantic, strictly business, but a real visionary chemistry. They clicked.
Okay.
And what Andrey offered was, well, it was remarkable. Especially for a young woman, post-scandal in that Silicon Valley climate. He promised full funding, complete access to Badoo's backend, their servers, their data tools, a massive technical advantage.
Wow. So basically the engine.
Exactly. But here's the killer part. Whitney would be CEO. Full stop. All branding decisions, all product direction, all positioning entirely hers. No interference from Badoo.
That sounds incredibly rare.
Unheard of, almost. It was this huge vote of confidence in her vision, her leadership. She saw the opportunity for what it was, a chance to build something truly on her own terms, and she grabbed it immediately.
All right, so she has the backing, she has the autonomy. She sets up a small, focused team, and notably not in Silicon Valley, right? They chose Austin, Texas.
Yeah, deliberately creating some distance maybe, a different vibe.
Yeah.
Less pressure, perhaps.
Makes sense. And the name Bumble emerges pretty quickly.
It's a great name, isn't it? Kind of sweet, but also has that energy, that buzz. Approachable, but strong. It fits.
It really does. And the core idea, that defining feature.
Elegantly simple, profoundly disruptive. On heterosexual matches, only the woman can initiate the conversation. Send the first message.
Just that one change.
But think about the message it sends. The sources mention early focus groups where women talked constantly about feeling overwhelmed, even harassed by the flood of messages on other apps. Bumble flipped that script entirely. It wasn't an add-on feature, it was the fundamental design principle. Women are in charge from the start, by design.
And the timeline to get this out was intense.
Incredibly aggressive. They had the vision, the backing, a passionate team. They moved incredibly fast.
How fast are we talking?
Just a few months. From founding the company to launch, they were iterating, testing designs, refining the user experience for that women make the first move feature, making it feel natural, empowering.
That's lightning speed for a new product.
It really is. So by December 2014, barely 8 months after she walked away from Tinder Bumble launches.
And it wasn't just, hey, here's another app.
No, from day one, the feeling was different. It was clear she wasn't just launching code, she was launching a movement, a new way to think about online connection. That focus was palpable.
So December 2014, Bumble enters the scene. And it's a crowded scene, right? Tinder's huge, OkCupid, Match.com, even Badoo internationally.
Absolutely. Fiercely competitive market, established players everywhere.
But Bumble had something none of them really had.
Exactly. It had that story, Whitney's story. And it had a clear mission. It wasn't just swipe, match, repeat. It was explicitly about making dating safer, more respectful, more empowering for women.
And that mission just hit a nerve.
It resonated powerfully. The sources are really clear on this. There was this whole demographic, mostly women, who felt ignored or even unsafe on other platforms. Bumble spoke directly to them.
And the growth in that first year, it was pretty stunning, wasn't it? Especially considering they didn't have a massive advertising budget.
Remarkable is the word. Very little traditional ad spend. It was heavily reliant on two things. Whitney herself telling her story, that narrative of resilience and reinvention, was incredibly compelling and good old-fashioned word of mouth.
People just telling their friends.
Yeah, viral spread. Plus, they were smart about it. They used influencer partnerships, but carefully chose people who genuinely aligned with the brand's values. They built these campus ambassador programs, getting students excited, spreading the word organically on college campuses.
Grassroots marketing.
Totally. And their messaging was bold. Make the first move. It wasn't just a tagline. It was like an anthem.
And it worked.
Phenomenally. Over 1 million users within the first 12 months. That's explosive growth for a new app with minimal ad spend. But what I find really fascinating is that Whitney didn't just stop at dating. She had this broader vision.
Right, the BFF and Biz features.
Exactly. She understood that meaningful connections aren't just romantic. We need friends, we need professional contacts. So launching Bumble BFF for finding friends and Bumble Biz for professional networking, these weren't just random add-ons.
They felt strategic.
Highly strategic. It was about positioning Bumble not just as a dating app, but as a comprehensive social ecosystem. A place, especially for women, where you could build all kinds of important relationships. Romantic, platonic, professional, all within a framework that prioritized safety and respect. On your own terms.
That's a much bigger vision than just dating.
Absolutely. It allowed the brand to grow beyond that initial niche and aim for much broader relevance in users' lives. And tied into all of this was Bumble's design and its focus on safety. That wasn't an accident either.
The look and feel were different, that yellow.
Yeah, the warm yellow theme, the clean interface, the softer aesthetic. It wasn't just about looking nice. It consciously aimed to make people feel safer, more comfortable. And they backed it up with action. Bumble got known pretty quickly for taking a hard line against online abuse.
So?
Implementing strong moderation tools, offering safety tips right in the app, and famously, that ban on shirtless mirror selfies.
I remember that.
Right. It seems small, but it was a clear signal. We're trying to reduce objectification, foster a more respectful vibe here.
So how much do you think that focus on safety really drove the growth? Was that a major factor?
I think it was huge. It showed they understood a core anxiety many users, especially women, had about online dating. It built trust. It suggested that maybe user priorities were shifting, maybe safety and respect were becoming just as important, if not more so, than just maximizing the number of matches. Competitors weren't really focused on that back then.
So fast forward a few years. By 2020, what does Bumble look like? Where has this strategy taken them?
It's a global force. Expanded into over 150 countries, over 100 million registered users. And it really cemented that reputation as the feminist answer to Tinder.
And internally, the company reflected that.
Very much so. The sources point out that over 60% of Bumble's workforce were women. That's highly unusual in tech, especially in the dating app world. It wasn't just talk. It was embedded in the company culture. And Whitney remained the face of it all. Constantly doing interviews, panels, magazine covers. She didn't shy away from her past. She owned the whole story, the trauma and the triumph.
Her personal narrative was the brand narrative.
Inextricably linked. It gave Bumble this authenticity, this powerful human element that other apps just didn't have.
And thinking about the timing, the hashtag #MeToo movement really exploded around 2017, 2018. How did that intersect with Bumble's rise?
The timing was, well, impeccable, almost uncannily perfect.
Right, when these huge conversations about power, consent, safety, harassment were happening globally.
Exactly. And suddenly, here's Bumble. The only major dating platform fundamentally designed from its core feature to address those very power dynamics, to empower women.
It put them right in the cultural spotlight.
Absolutely. That cultural alignment was incredibly powerful. It elevated Bumble beyond just being a useful app. It became a symbol of female empowerment in the digital age. So by the end of 2020, it wasn't just about user numbers and revenue growth, though those were impressive. Bumble had achieved real cultural impact. And Whitney Wolfe Herd wasn't just seen as a successful founder anymore. She was seen as a visionary leader who was actively changing the rules of the game in Silicon Valley.
Okay, so late 2020 rolls around. Bumble isn't just a disruptor anymore. It's this global brand, huge user base, strong loyalty, especially among women, making good money from subscriptions.
Yeah, they had proven the model, strong revenue streams, clear brand identity. It was one of the hottest tech stories out there.
But for Whitney Wolfe Herd, taking the company public, it wasn't just about the money, was it? The sources suggest something deeper.
It seems like it was much more about visibility, about cementing the legacy, and about sending this really powerful, undeniable message.
A message reflecting her journey.
Exactly. And the mission of the company she'd built literally from the ashes of her previous experience, it was about making a statement on the biggest stage possible. And the IPO itself. The sheer symbolism of that moment was incredible. February 11th, 2021.
Just 7 years after the Tinder exit.
7 years. And there she is, taking Bumble public on the NASDAQ. It wasn't just a financial event. It felt cinematic. The descriptions paint this picture. She's on the virtual stage, wearing her signature bright Bumble yellow.
Yeah, holding her baby son, right?
Yeah. Holding her infant son on her hip as she rings the opening bell. That image just exploded.
It really did.
It was such a powerful visual statement, challenging every stereotype about what a high-powered CEO, especially in tech, looks like, how they should behave. She wasn't just entering a new financial league, she was crashing the gates of the old boys club, the public company CEO club that had historically been so closed off to women, especially women who'd rocked the boat like she had. And the numbers themselves were just staggering. What are we talking about here?
Let's break it down.
Okay, the IPO priced at $43 a share, which was already strong.
But then it took off.
Took off is an understatement. The stock soared nearly 67% on the first day of trading.
Wow.
The company closed that day valued at $13 billion.
$13 billion.
And Whitney herself, with her stake around 11.6%, her net worth jumped over $1.5 billion instantly.
Making her the youngest self-made female billionaire in the world at 31.
At 31, it wasn't just impressive, it was a validation. Proof that you could build a hugely successful tech company based on different values, prioritizing women's experiences, and still win big.
So, looking beyond the billions, what's the real meaning here? What did that moment truly symbolize?
It was so much bigger than just the money. Think about it.
Yeah.
The tech industry, Silicon Valley, notoriously difficult for women. The dating app space, often criticized, rightly so, for enabling bad behavior. And here's a woman who had to sue her previous company for how she was treated.
Standing tall.
Standing tall, triumphantly, at the helm of her own public company. An empire built specifically on female empowerment. It just completely flipped the narrative.
And that image with her son, it became instantly iconic, didn't it? It was everywhere. Forbes, Bloomberg, all the major outlets.
Absolutely. And it wasn't just symbolic. It felt revolutionary because it was so authentic.
She wasn't trying to fit into the old mold of leadership.
No, she was actively redefining it, showing that leadership could be strong and nurturing, powerful and personal, that you didn't have to compartmentalize your life to succeed at that level.
Some people probably criticized it, but...
Oh, I'm sure. But for many, it just amplified her strength, her authenticity.
So, as that BMBL ticker symbol lit up NASDAQ.
It was more than just a stock listing. It was the climax of this incredibly personal journey from pain to power. Whitney Wolfe Herd had rewritten her own story, definitively. From co-founder in crisis to CEO in command.
But as we know, staying at the top, that presented a whole new set of challenges. The fight wasn't over.
Right. So after the IPO high, things seemed amazing for a while. Bumble was the darling of the market. Whitney was celebrated everywhere.
Yeah, the momentum was huge. Lots of optimism about expanding beyond dating, becoming this bigger social platform. Everything looked golden.
But under the surface, trouble was brewing.
Quietly at first, yeah. Storm clouds gathering. The landscape was starting to shift in ways that Bumble maybe wasn't fully prepared for.
The dating industry itself was changing. Subtly, but significantly. Gen Z users, coming of age, had different expectations.
They weren't just about swiping.
Not entirely. They were looking for deeper connections, more authentic interactions, more personalized experiences. And they were very aware of new tech possibilities, like AI potentially offering better matchmaking.
So the simple swipe match chat model wasn't enough anymore.
It was becoming less compelling. The ground rules were shifting, and established players like Bumble needed to evolve quickly or get left behind. And at the same time, the competition just got way more intense, didn't it?
Yeah, you mentioned Hinge earlier.
Right. Hinge surged, marketing itself as designed to be deleted, appealing directly to people looking for serious relationships, a core segment for Bumble, too.
And Bumble's unique thing.
Women message first. Suddenly, it wasn't unique anymore. Other platforms saw Bumble's success and started copying it, adding similar features, ladies first modes.
So that key differentiator kind of got diluted.
Exactly. It neutralized their main selling point. And that raises a huge question. If what made you special becomes commonplace, How do you keep your edge?
Yeah, what's your unique value then?
The sources suggest the novelty just wore off. That initial buzz faded, and Bumble was left looking less distinct than before. And the numbers started to show it, pretty starkly, late 2022 onwards.
User growth slowed down.
Slowed, then basically stalled. And churn rates, people leaving the app started creeping up. That's a bad sign. It means users aren't sticking around.
And revenue.
Started missing targets consistently, which spooked investors, obviously. And that massive $13 billion IPO valuation, it just collapsed.
How bad did it get?
Within 3 years of the IPO, the company lost over 90% of its market value, dropped below $600 million by mid-2025.
90% loss. That's brutal.
Absolutely brutal. The stock price tanked. Investor confidence just vanished. It's a stark reminder, isn't it? How quickly market sentiment can turn, even for a revolutionary company. Constant innovation is key.
And what was happening inside the company during all this? Was it smoother sailing internally?
Not at all. Things were tough inside, too. With growth slowing, tough questions were being asked about Bumble's direction.
The criticism was that it became bloated, trying to do too much.
Yeah, the argument was, it's trying to be a dating app and a friend app with BFF and a career app with Biz, but maybe not excelling at any one thing anymore, losing focus.
Spreading itself too thin.
Pretty much. And sources say morale took a big hit. That initial energy, that momentum from the early days in the IPO, gone. Felt like the company was adrift.
Which led to some tough decisions. June 2025, the layoffs.
Yeah, a significant restructuring, a 30% workforce reduction, about 240 jobs cut globally.
That's a major cut.
Huge. Officially, it was framed as refocusing on core product value, streamlining, getting back to basics.
That's a real message.
The underlying message was clear. We lost our way. We drifted too far from what made us successful. Drastic changes are needed. It was a public admission that things had gone wrong. And then, in March 2025, came the move that maybe felt inevitable. Whitney Wolfe Herd returns as CEO.
She'd step back a bit, right? Into an executive chair role.
Yeah, less day-to-day operational involvement. But with the company in crisis, she knew she had to step back in, lead from the front again.
And her first move wasn't some grand promise.
No, quite the opposite. It was about acknowledging the hard truth. In her first all-hands meeting back, she was apparently incredibly candid. She told employees straight up, "We got distracted, we drifted too far from what made us different. It's time to start over, not from scratch, but from focus."
Wow, that's direct.
Incredibly direct, and maybe that's what was needed. She admitted Bumble had lost its edge, its intimacy, its clarity, acknowledged the product had become bloated, uninspired.
That level of honesty from the top,
Yeah,
it must have been powerful.
crucial, I think, for rebuilding trust, for setting a new tone. How vital is that kind of self-assessment for a real comeback? Probably essential. It's the hard first step.
So the goal wasn't just fixing the numbers.
No, it was about rediscovering that early spirit, the scrappy, user-obsessed Bumble, not the corporate version, finding clarity again.
So the empire she built now needed rebuilding, a huge task. Okay, so March 2025, Whitney Wolfe Herd is back in the CEO chair. And Bumble isn't just struggling financially. It sounds like it was having an identity crisis.
Absolutely, a company searching for itself. And Whitney, the billionaire founder, she wasn't chasing headlines or valuations this time.
What was she chasing?
Relevance. Relevance in a dating world that had changed dramatically since Bumble first launched. A much tougher challenge in many ways. And building on what you said about that first all-hands meeting, her approach was key. No sugarcoating. Just that blunt admission, we lost our edge.
That the product felt bloated, uninspired.
Exactly. Admitting growth had become formulaic. That honesty, as we discussed, is so important. It likely resonated with employees who felt that drift themselves. It creates a foundation for real change.
Right, it signals, I see the problem too.
But she wasn't just there to diagnose the problem. She was there to fix it, to rebuild. She kicked off this deep dive internal audit, looking at everything, the user experience, how data flowed, how they made money.
Asking the tough question.
Really tough questions like, what do users actually love here? What feels generic? What features made sense years ago but are just clutter now? And the big one, what can Bumble realistically be in this new landscape? With AI changing everything and people maybe tired of the old swipe model.
So a fundamental rethink.
Totally. And within months, that audit led to a major overhaul of the product roadmap. A lot of the side features, the stuff that diluted the experience, gone.
What came in instead?
A big focus on using AI intelligently for matchmaking, trying to go beyond surface-level stuff to deeper compatibility, personalized discovery features that learn what you actually want, and strengthening safety features even further with better tech.
So shifting the core value proposition again.
Exactly. The idea was Bumble won't just be the women-first app anymore. It needs to be the most intentional, the most intelligent, the most human-first platform out there. That became the new mission.
And for the user, what did that translate to beyond the tech changes?
At the same time, she doubled down on trust and emotional safety areas where maybe some competitors were cutting corners, focusing just on engagement metrics.
Well, others focused on gamification, making it faster.
Right, the rapid swiping.
Yeah.
Whitney refocused Bumble on quality conversations, on emotional connection, using tech, yes, but also human psychology in the design.
And internally, how did she change how they worked?
She brought back that startup energy. Smaller teams, flatter structures, faster communication. The expectation was ship quickly, test things fearlessly, and if something doesn't work, kill it fast. Don't let things linger.
That second first-year idea.
Exactly. Like hitting the reset button. A return to those scrappy, innovative roots that made Bumble successful in the first place. Rebooting the culture. And by mid-2025, were there signs it was working?
What do the sources say?
Early signs pointed towards renewal. User retention started ticking up. People were staying longer, engaging more. That's a key health metric. And the press coverage started to change. Fewer stories about crisis, more about the comeback strategy, the product shifts.
The narrative was shifting.
Yeah. And maybe most importantly, the Bumble brand itself, which had maybe lost some of its shine. It started to regain relevance, not through massive hype, but through this quieter sense of renewed purpose, of sticking to its core values in a noisy market.
So the bigger picture here.
It feels like Wolfe Herd wasn't just trying to save a company. She was trying to reaffirm a belief that even in today's algorithm-driven world, there's still a huge need, a huge market for platforms built on genuine human connection and strong values.
And this time, it wasn't about proving critics wrong.
Seems like it was less about external validation and more about just doing what she does best, seeing a need, having a vision, and making that first move to build it. Again, hashtag tag tag outro.
You know, when you lay it all out, Whitney Wolfe Herd's story is just, it's so much more than a typical business case study. It really is this masterclass in resilience, isn't it? In reinvention. And like the sources said, maybe even a form of revenge done right.
Yeah, that phrase captures something.
Think about it. Pushed out of her first company, publicly attacked, constantly underestimated, and yet she doesn't just rebuild. She builds something even bolder, something that directly addressed the issues she faced.
It's true. Bumble wasn't just born from ambition. It was born from hurt, from that desire to create something fundamentally better, safer.
And that hurt, that experience, it became her superpower in a way, her unique edge. It gave her that deep understanding of what was missing.
And she took that one core idea, let women make the first move, and spun it into gold. A multi-billion-dollar company, a global movement, a genuine cultural reset for online dating, built around women's needs.
The $13 billion IPO, youngest self-made female billionaire at 31. History made, no question.
But maybe the most telling part, the part that really speaks volumes, is what happened after that peak. When the market cooled, when Bumble stumbled, when the spotlight faded.
She came back.
She came back. And crucially, it didn't seem like it was for the fame or the ego. It seemed like it was for the product itself, for the original mission, for that core belief that tech can be used for good, with real intention.
In a world where so many founders cash out and move on.
She chased evolution. She faced the hard truths, did the hard work of rebuilding. In a system that still often tries to sideline women, she spoke volumes by just building, creating that alternative.
And starting over not once, but twice when most would have quit.
Exactly. That resilience, that willingness to rebuild from the ashes. Twice. That, the sources seem to argue, is the real source of her power, her lasting impact.
It really makes you think. Maybe the best kind of power isn't about never falling. Maybe it comes from surviving the fall. From facing the setbacks, learning the lessons, and then consciously choosing to get back up and try again. But on your own terms this time. We hope this deep dive into Whitney Wolfe Herd's incredible journey has given you some things to think about, maybe some new perspectives. And as you reflect on her story, maybe consider this for yourself. What setbacks, what challenges have you faced in your own life, your own work? And is it possible that reframing those very experiences could unlock your unique advantage? Could that be the key to making your next big move? What unexpected power might be hiding right there in your own moments of struggle?